I welcome you to the 2023 Franciscan Zoom lectures hosted by the Franciscan School of Theology. Our presenter tonight, Dr. Roger Bergman, PhD, is Professor Emeritus of Cultural and Social Studies at Creighton University, where he served as founding director of the Justice and Peace Studies program from 1995 until his retirement in 2017. He is the author of the award-winning Catholic Social Learning, Educating the Faith That Does Justice, which comes out in an expanded edition this year, 2023, and the book Preventing Unjust War, A Catholic Argument for Selective Conscientious Objection, which came out in 2020. He and his wife, Dr. Wendy Wright, who has also lectured for FST, live in Santa Barbara, where they are parishioners at the Old Mission. They have 3 children and 6 grandchildren, more than half of whom are twins. Tonight's talk is entitled Paul Farmer, Moral Exemplar Saint. Welcome, Dr. Bergman.
Thank you. Before launching into the talk itself, I want to thank Father Garrett Galvin, president of FST, for the invitation to give a lecture on Dr. Paul Farmer. As it happened, preparing for this lecture turned out to be my Lenten discipline. The time was spiritually well spent. Thank you, Garrett. Thanks also to Juliet for hosting and to Joe and Brady for technical support, and thanks to all of those joining us this evening. I also want to express my gratitude to 2 members of the Partners of Health staff who made it possible for me to present, as you will see, 21 photographs of Dr. Farmer in action. Amy Carzo, Senior Director of Communications and Integrated Planning, and Thomas Patterson, Photo Editor. Many thanks for your courtesy, patience, and expertise. So I came across this article by Leonard Bowman on Bonaventure, and this one statement leapt out at me. In Bonaventure, the exemplar is the pattern or the model for the form being made. So our question tonight is, what is the form being made? I'd like to suggest that this text from Popularum Progressio, which actually then quotes John 23, fits the bill real nicely. The individual who is animated by true charity labors skillfully to discover the causes of misery, to find the means to combat it, to overcome it resolutely. A creator of peace, he will follow his path, lighting the lamps of joy and playing their brilliance and loveliness on the hearts of men across the surface of the globe, leading them to recognize across all frontiers the faces of their brothers, the faces of their friends. On the first anniversary of Dr. Farmer's death, give us this day, daily prayer for today's Catholic, a devotional guide, had this to say about him under the heading, Blessed Among Us. Dr. Paul Farmer died suddenly of a heart attack on February 21st, 2022, in a hospital in Rwanda that he had helped to found. It was difficult to account for all he had accomplished in his 62 years. Advocating for high-quality healthcare to some of the poorest people on earth, he was a transformative figure who touched the lives of millions, not only those who were sick and poor, but also countless young people he inspired with his confidence that another world is possible. After graduating from Duke, Farmer began volunteering in a hospital in rural Haiti, in a little village called Conge. There he began to realize how much health disparities were a factor of wider social issues, lack of food, transportation, disregard for human rights, as well as social attitudes toward those who were considered expendable. The idea that some lives matter less is the root of all that is wrong with the world, he observed. While a medical student at Harvard, he commuted to Haiti to develop new methods of grassroots care. Eventually, these principles became the foundation of Partners in Health, a global organization devising new strategies for addressing such diseases as tuberculosis, AIDS, and Ebola. While shouldering an enormous teaching load at Harvard, he continued to divide his time with primary care patients around the world. Farmer's life work was deeply shaped by the influence of liberation theology. In a book written with Father Gustavo Gutierrez, he noted, "If I am hungry, that is a material problem. If someone else is hungry, that is a spiritual problem." And he said, "People call me a saint, and I think I have to work harder because a saint would be a great thing to be." This is a picture of the young Dr. Farmer with his two of his most important co-founders, Dr. Jim Kim, also a Harvard trainee, and Ophelia Dahl, yes, the daughter of the famous author. So in 1987, with sort of a couple other people, they founded Partners in Health, which now has 19,000 employees worldwide. This always gets me. In 1990, he completed his MD and a PhD in anthropology at Harvard University, all the time building this new organization. Just 3 years later, he was recognized as a MacArthur Fellow, popularly known as the Genius Grant. The award was $250,000, which he gave to the poor. In 1994, having read Farmer's first two books, both on Haiti, I wrote a column about him for the newspaper of the Archdiocese of Omaha. I'd like to share some of that with you. No doubt I took particular notice of Dr. Farmer because I had traveled to Haiti in 1991, just a month after the inauguration of the first democratically elected president in Haitian history, and then again in 1992 on the one-year anniversary of a brutal military coup against him. I was invested in Haiti. Further educational trips took place in 1998, 2011, 2015, and 2016. In my column, I quoted a Boston Globe story about the Genius Grant. Instead of using the money for himself, Dr. Farmer has decided to fund annual grants to the people he refers to as the world's invisible warriors in the fight against poverty. Yolande Jean, a Haitian woman who spent 11 months incarcerated in oppressive conditions at the U.S. Navy base at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, received the first such award, a $5,000 grant to help her bring attention to the plight of Haitian refugees. The Globe report continued, "Dr. Farmer is no dilettante in the struggle. He splits his time between Harvard Medical School and a primary care clinic in Conge, an impoverished village in the central plateau of Haiti. Moreover, Dr. Farmer has written widely on the connection between poverty and disease in scholarly journals and two books. I had read those two books and was particularly impressed that," quoting the column again, "the 34-year-old MD also has a PhD in anthropology and brings a scholar's intellectual tenacity to his advocacy for the Haitian people. He has mastered a great deal of the scholarly and journalistic literature on Haiti, including, most importantly, writings by Haitian scholars available only in French. Thus, he can offer his reader a Haitian version of the country's history as a much-needed corrective to the frequently self-serving and prejudicial perspectives of too many so-called experts on Haiti in the U.S. I concluded, for such work in the library and the clinic, motivated by his love of the poor, Paul Farmer was awarded $250,000. Just think what Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha, could do with that. Just think what Dr. Farmer is doing with that. It's enough to make me think of him as a personal hero. Perhaps he could be yours too." The following year, I invited him to speak at Creighton. 22 years later, I suggested to our president that Dr. Farmer would be a worthy recipient of an honorary doctorate and an excellent choice to deliver commencement addresses for both the medical and other schools and colleges of the university. The president accepted my suggestion, and Dr. Farmer accepted the invitation. Before the ceremony, not only did he remember me, he treated me like an old and cherished friend. So Aristotle says that emulation is a painful emotion. This is a bit of a confession. I feel about Paul Farmer much the way I feel about St. Oscar Romero: awe, gratitude, and shame. Farmer felt the same way about Romero, who figured in his adult conversion to a committed Catholic Christianity, as he did in mine. So let's get to the substance of the talk. Paul Farmer's moral exemplar. So for many years, I taught a course at Creighton on moral exemplars, and I often taught this book by two prestigious developmental psychologists, Ann Colby and William Damon, titled Some Do Care, Contemporary Lives of Moral Commitment. And they give a very credible explanation for why they settled on these 5 criteria for identifying moral exemplars. I've highlighted commitment to humanity because I think as that is essential, fundamental. You could make an argument that the other 4 attributes are not in and of themselves necessarily moral. We can talk more about that if we have a chance. So let's hear how Colby and Damon very briefly describe each one of these criteria. Commitment to humanity, a sustained commitment to moral ideals or principles that include a generalized respect for humanity or a sustained evidence of moral virtue. Integrity is the disposition to act in accord with one's moral ideals or principles, implying also a consistency between one's actions and intentions and between the means and ends of one's actions. Courage, a willingness to risk one's self-interest for the sake of one's moral values. Charisma, a tendency to be inspiring to others and thereby move them to moral action. And finally, humility, a sense of realistic humility about one's own importance relative to the world at large, implying a relative lack of concern for one's own ego. So we'll take a little more in-depth look at each one of these, brief as each of them will be. Dr. Farmer said in one of his books, "For me, an area of moral clarity is you're in front of someone who's suffering and you have the tools at your disposal to alleviate that suffering or even to do away with it, and you act." And there he is at the clinic in Conge, Haiti. Commitment to humanity is built into the mission of Partners in Health. Here's in front of you the first paragraph of their mission statement. Our mission is to provide a preferential option for the poor in healthcare. By establishing long-term relationships with sister organizations based in settings of poverty, Partners in Health strives to achieve 2 overarching goals: to bring the benefits of modern medical science to those most in need of them, and to serve as an antidote to despair. And the statement goes on to say, we draw on the resources of the world's leading medical and academic institutions, such as Harvard, and on the lived experience of the world's poorest and sickest communities. At its root, our mission is both medical and moral. It is based on solidarity rather than charity alone. When our patients are ill and have no access to care, our team of health professionals, scholars, and activists will do whatever it takes to make them well, just as we would do if a member of our own families or we ourselves were ill. And this was carried out through accompaniment by community health workers, those people who from the local area were trained to provide all the necessary additions to the medical care itself, food, transportation, and so forth, so that, in fact, poor people could take advantage of modern medicine. Partners in Health has established state-of-the-art teaching hospitals in Haiti and Rwanda, and clinics in Kazakhstan, Lesotho, Liberia, Malawi, Mexico, Navajo Nation, Russia, Sierra Leone, and the US. Most importantly, 99% of the staff are from countries served. So they're not only addressing medical problems, they're creating employment. Here is the University Hospital of Mirabalai, Haiti, in the Central Plateau, not far from where Dr. Farmer got his start in the little village of Conge. I've had the great pleasure and honor of visiting that hospital twice. It's teeming with patients. They have a huge catchment area. You will see that the rooftops are covered with solar panels, so it's completely energy independent. This is the University of Global Health Equity in Rwanda. There is a hospital across the valley. This is where people in that area, that part of Africa, go to get trained. And you'll see that also here we have solar panels on the roofs. This is one of the graduating classes having just received their white coat. It's the famous white coat ceremony, and you can see Dr. Farmer right in the middle of all of them. Here he is with some of his proteges in a hallway and then in the laboratory working together. On top there he is demonstrating how to enter an MRI machine. That just suggests that indeed these are state-of-the-art hospitals. And on the bottom, he is conferring with some nurses. This, I think, is in Rwanda. Oops, excuse me. As for integrity, I offer 3 testimonials from very reputable sources. Jenny Weiss Block on the left was one of Paul's chief advisors, kind of a chief of staff, if you will. She was also, as a trained lay Dominican theologian, Paul's spiritual director. He referred to her as his interior decorator. And now Kenosis Man is my nickname for my beloved friend Paul, because he did not cling to prestige or wealth or reputation. No, he emptied himself each and every day in love and service to others, especially the world's poorest people. And from Sister Barbara Reed, a well-known scripture scholar who is president of the Catholic Theological Union in Chicago, where some Franciscans study theology when they can't get into FST maybe. Paul had a way of making every person he ever met feel like they were among his best friends. He gave everyone that kind of attention, a most extraordinary gift. And finally, from one of his proteges, Dr. Sriram Shamasundar, who's now at the University of California, San Francisco School of Medicine. The patient died. Paul was devastated. He was heartbroken. After 40 years, losing one patient was like losing the whole world. He had unabashedly loved that dying man and had told him so every day. I'd like to suggest that there are at least 3 different kinds of courage: moral courage, intellectual courage, physical courage. As to moral courage, he challenged the global public health authorities, such as World Health Organization, on whether treating poor patients in poor countries with the best modern medicine was cost effective. They didn't think so. And he proved them wrong by innovative practice. Examples are AIDS in Haiti and multi-drug resistance tuberculosis in Peru. Intellectual courage. He argued in his many books and articles by demonstrating with scholarly discipline that historical depth and geographical breadth were necessary for an adequate social analysis of contemporary infectious disease epidemics. He knew little about Upper West Africa when Ebola broke out there. He did his homework. Wrote 100-some pages on that question of colonialism in that part of the world as much of the explanation for why Ebola erupted there. As for physical courage, he repeatedly put himself on the front lines of the battle against AIDS when Haiti was claimed falsely to be its source, multi-drug resistance TB in Russian prisons, and Ebola, when local healthcare workers were frequently infected, often mortally. And he contracted malaria several times himself. He served in Haiti immediately after the 2010 earthquakes, when later quakes were still happening. This is a little testimonial from Father James Keenan, a Jesuit professor at Boston College, who was a good friend of Paul. To know Paul was to know a man who faced disease and death more than anyone we knew. He was fearless. If you read his recent book on Ebola, fevers, feuds, and diamonds, you knew how incredibly courageous he was. Charisma. Tracy Kidder is the author of Mountains Beyond Mountains, the famous biography of Dr. Farmer, who had traveled with him extensively. He showed me more reasons for despair than I had ever seen before or had ever imagined. And yet being around him and the whole crew whom he had inspired to join him was exhilarating, because I got to see with my own eyes what this small group of people were able to do. And again, from Dr. Shamasundar, a protege, when I finished my residency, like so many physicians in my generation, I attempted to follow his example. He made me feel as if I were making the only career decision that made sense, choosing what he called pragmatic solidarity alongside the poor. This work is where necessity, urgency, and joy become bound together. Said he gave two commencement addresses at Creighton. Here's a photo of him behind the podium. If the photographer knew what he's doing, he would have included me. I was about 2 rows beyond that. He has given so many commencement addresses that they were made into a book, To Repair the World. Paul Farmer Speaks to the Next Generation. This is to see his charisma in action. 19 commencement addresses at Emory, Boston College, Boston University, and on, these prestigious schools, often to graduating medical classes. Finally, humility. Back to his interior decorator, Jenny Weissblock. Paul would be the last person who would ever have thought of himself as a saint. He was far too aware of his faults and human failings, and like most of us, knew he had many. He would have chuckled and shrugged his shoulders, but then turned serious and said something like, "Hey, if it will make people think about how they make a preferential option for the poor and work together to build the kingdom of God in the here and now, call me anything you want." Again, from Tracy Kidder, the most important conversation I had with him about religious beliefs was the one at the end of Mountains Beyond Mountains, the quest of Dr. Paul Farmer, a man who would cure the world. This is my interjection, which doesn't sound very humble. When he talks about the long defeat, a phrase he probably picked up from reading Camus. But his rendering of its meaning struck me as fundamentally religious. You do things as confidently as possible. You try to win your victories, but you're making common cause with the losers, the poor, the destitute, the vulnerable. So inevitably, some of your efforts are going to fail, or maybe most of them, or maybe all of them. But you don't quit because of that. You don't change sides because of that. So it points back to why you do what you do in the first place. And the answer has got to have something to do with faith and justice. That seems to me one very credible way to think about humility. I want to talk a little bit about Paul's books, and I have proposing to you that there's a kind of formula for a Paul Farmer book, and I would put it this way. The topic is always going to be global health equity or preferential option for the poor in healthcare. The method is almost always countering blaming the victim with a hermeneutic of generosity. And I'll give you an example of that in a little bit. His strategy is unflinching historical truth-telling regarding social injustice, even if he has to do a lot of research, which he's done for various parts of the world. His tactic is to tell very engaging personal stories of both victims and survivors. I would say one of his foremost skills as a writer is that has some pretty great rhetorical bite. He's not above some irony and even sarcasm. His motivation, I would say, is moral clarity and indignation. Now, I'm a little bit putting words in his mouth here, but I would say the takeaway from any of his books could be summed up in this almost slogan: no more stupid deaths. Stupid deaths is a phrase that Paul picked up from his Haitian patients, who knew when they died of treatable diseases that they were dying a stupid death. And when somebody would congratulate Paul on curing one of these people, tell him it was a miracle, he would say, imagine that, curing a poor person of a treatable disease. Tactic of personal stories. These are first names of some of the people you would meet reading his books. Mano, Anita, and Dieudonné, who he describes as water refugees, and I'll explain that in just a minute, who were victims of impoverishment and therefore AIDS in Haiti. Yolande Jean, Chouchou Louis, and Asefi, who demonstrate the disease makes a preferential option for the poor in Haiti, and who demonstrate the political economy of repression and brutality in Haiti and in Guantanamo Bay. You will meet in his book on Ebola, Ibrahim and Yaboum, both of whom nearly died of Ebola, but survived and became caregivers themselves, heroic survivors. And Joseph, a young man in Haiti who presented with MDT, tuberculosis and AIDS. And there were photographs taken of him at his worst, and he is literally skin and bones. But thanks to the good work of Dr. Farmer and the accompagnateurs, the community health workers, Joseph recovered, put on 30 pounds within a month, and was soon out as an activist on behalf of AIDS education. Those before and after photos became a global phenomenon. So the Peligre Dam and Lake in central Haiti figures prominently especially in Farmer's first book, which was a revision of his anthropology dissertation. And this project demonstrates how he saw the world. Nothing special about this dam or the lake behind it or the river flowing through it, except how it came about. In my time in Haiti, I had driven by that lake a couple times at least. Had I not read Dr. Farmer, I would have thought, what a lovely lake. Oh, look, they've got a hydroelectric dam. What a good thing. This is where the water refugees come from. This is described in the first chapter of his first book, and it serves as a paradigm for how Farmer understood what it means to practice social medicine. In 1956, the Peligre hydroelectric dam was built on a river in the central plateau of Haiti, a collaboration of the Haitian government and the U.S. Export-Import Bank. The dam was designed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and built by the U.S. corporation Brown and Root. The dam flooded the rich agricultural valley in which many Haitian families had thrived for generations. They were pitifully compensated, if at all, and were forced to flee from the rising waters to higher rocky ground where farming was nearly impossible. Meanwhile, the electricity generated by the dam benefited the rich in the capital city, but not those displaced. Dr. Farmer learned from his patients to link their desperate poverty and resulting poor health to the dam. He understood the AIDS deaths of Mano, Anita, and Dieudonné in the context of their background as water refugees. Rather than blame the victims for contracting HIV/AIDS through their own fault, he offered a hermeneutic of generous historical and international analysis to match his compassionate medical care. So let me give you a little example of his writing that picks up some of these themes. In Haiti, AIDS became, like other infectious diseases, a disorder disproportionately striking the poor. It is my devout wish that AIDS and accusation, Haiti and the geography of blame, might move North Americans involved in community-based and academic responses to HIV to enlarge their own frames of analysis. Although HIV is a very cosmopolitan microbe, AIDS discourse, already so abundant as to be overwhelming, has always been provincial. Were Mono or Anita or Dieudonné to hear the North American debates triggered by AIDS, they might find that elitist struggles over goods and services long denied to the poor. Or they might deem such debates unreasonably abstract in the face of great suffering. Above all, these debates would suggest to them a vast distance, when, from an intercellular parasite's point of view, the distance between us is microscopic. Covers a lot of territory in a few sentences there. So he wrote 6 books of sole authorship. The first one I mentioned already, a dissertation from Harvard, The Uses of Haiti, more explicitly history, in response to the coup against that first democratically elected president and all the scurrilous things that were said around that time, in addition to all the brutality of the coup itself. 2 books followed upon that, Infections and Inequalities, The Modern Plagues. One of those plagues is inequality itself. And Pathologies of Power, Health, Human Rights, and the New War on the Poor. As the subtitle suggests, that's where he really takes a deep dive into the notion that healthcare is a universal human right, not a commodity to be purchased by the affluent. And then in response to the work he did in Haiti after the earthquake, he wrote a long essay and gathered up a commentary from some of his colleagues to produce the book Haiti After the Earthquake. His last book, published just 2 years before his death, is a report on his work in Upper West Africa, Fevers, Feuds, and Diamonds, Ebola, and the Ravages of History. Other books of interest, of course, top of the list, Tracy Kidder's Mountains Beyond Mountains, the biography. Jenny Weiss Block, who relies on Kidder but adds 15 more years of Farmer's life to the story, Paul Farmer, Servant to the Poor. Partner to the Poor, a Paul Farmer reader, 25 articles published in scholarly journals and brought here together under between 2 covers. And this may be a particular interest to the theologians in the audience. In the Company of the Poor, Conversations with Dr. Paul Farmer and Father Gustavo Gutierrez. Farmer was deeply influenced by liberation theology, especially Gustavo Gutierrez, and had the chance to meet him in Peru, where he was doing his own medical work. And they struck up a deep and lasting friendship, and this book eventually came about as a result of that. And then I mentioned his collection of commencement addresses to repair the world. Paul Farmer Speaks to the Next Generation. I just learned last week that a new book is coming out this summer, I think suggesting the scope of his influence, titled A Prophet to the Peoples, Paul Farmer's Witness and Theological Ethics. So this is about his writings. I thought it was instructive, given the topic tonight, that the cover includes an icon of Paul Farmer. That will be published this summer, I'm told. Let me suggest that if you felt like you only had time or energy or wanted just to know where to get started, if you were only to read 1 chapter of any of these books, probably you should read the one titled Health, Healing, and Social Justice, Insights from Liberation Theology. That's in both Pathologies of Power and in the Company of the Poor. In very non-technical language, he lays out his basic vision of healthcare as a human right and the problems with structural violence, he calls it, that leads poor people to have such terrible health problems. And here's a quote from that book. In my experience, people who work for social justice, regardless of their own station in life, tend to see the world as deeply flawed. Often, if these are privileged people like me, they understand that they are implicated, whether directly or indirectly, in the creation or maintenance of this structural violence. They can feel indignation, but also humility and penitence. Where I work, this is easy. I see the Pellegrini Dam almost every week. That Pellegrini Dam, again, the project of his own government, even before he was born, but he still feels implicated. Some great AV resources. Probably the place to start is Bending the Arc, a wonderful lengthy documentary about partners in health, not just about Paul Farmer. It's produced by Netflix and available on Netflix. The memorial service, just 3 weeks, I think, after his death, a little over a year ago, it's terribly moving. Number of well-known people speak, including Dr. Anthony Fauci, who was his senior, but regarded Paul as his mentor. And I think most movingly for me, his college-age daughter, Catherine, spoke about how she came to learn that she had to share her father with the world because he was gone traveling so much. He was not around a lot, but she learned to share her father with the world. And then just recently, they had a 1-year anniversary event. That's also available on the PIH website, Remembering Our Beloved Paul. So let's move into the final major thoughts of this presentation, again from Jenny Weiss Block. What now? For sure, we must go forward with hope and courage. Paul would expect nothing else, and believe me, no one in his orbit would want to disappoint Paul. But I feel I must share some comments that I have received in the 3 long days since Paul died. More than one person has told me that when they started to pray for Paul, they felt themselves shifting and beginning to pray to Paul. So might Paul Farmer be a saint? Well, I don't want to make a particularly Catholic argument here. I want to do something more transcultural in a more general sort of way, but still very exacting, as you'll see. These characteristics are from the Jesuit sociologist of religion, John Coleman. 6 items. First, exemplary model. I think we've seen that is true of Dr. Farmer in what we've already heard tonight. He was an extraordinary teacher. He not only won teaching awards at Harvard, but he really was a teacher of the world. Everywhere he went, in government circles, World Health Organization, so forth, he was teaching all the time. In the hospitals, he had a big hand in developing that University for Global Health Equity, an extraordinary teacher. A saint would be a wonder worker or source of benevolent power. Although Farmer himself might discount any kind of miraculous quality to what he did, says this is just modern science. He did share that knowledge of his with the poorest of the poor, and they regarded him as a miracle worker. And it seems to me there's no doubt that his power was benevolent and felt by everybody who came in contact with him through all the institutions that he helped to develop. Jenny Weiss Block has already suggested that people are already thinking of Paul as an intercessor, praying not just for him, but to him. 5th, this kind of generic saint would demonstrate a life refusing material attachments or comfort. The early parts of Mountains Beyond Mountains especially make the point of how little Farmer had to go on when he was starting this work in rural Haiti, no electricity and so forth. In the many years after the founding of Partners in Health, he never took a salary, though presumably what he was being paid at Harvard was more than sufficient for his needs. But that was never the point. And finally, this kind of saint would possess a special and revelatory relation to the holy. And I would suggest that for Paul, that could be summed up in Matthew 25, 31, 46, the vision of the last judgment. What you have done to the least of these, you have done unto me, or not. Paul knew that, lived it, and I think he reveals what that means. So let me conclude by just suggesting that here's a picture of one of our newest saints, not officially in the Catholic Church, but many already regarding him as saint. I think of him now as Saint Paul of Conge, Haiti, who was animated by true charity and labored skillfully to discover the causes of misery, found the means to combat them, and overcame them resolutely. A practitioner of a preferential option for the poor in healthcare, of pragmatic solidarity, he followed his path, lighting the lamps of joy and playing their brilliance and loveliness in the hearts of the destitute sick across the surface of the globe, leading others to recognize across all frontiers the faces of their brothers and sisters, the faces of their friends. I'm going to let you gaze at that for just a minute before I close the screen. So thank you for your very kind attention. I'm eager to hear what kind of questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bergman, for your lecture. I'm sure we all learned quite a lot hearing about Paul Farmer. This opportunity is brought to you by the Franciscan School of Theology Development Department. Let us give Dr. Bergman a virtual applause.